Before we dive in, imagine losing your job over something as harmless as your outfit, only to discover that decision would cost your company everything. Stay with me, because this story flips from unfair to unbelievable fast. And real quick, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you think this story is really about. I'm reading all of them. The announcement slid into everyone's inbox at exactly 7:03 a.m., wrapped in pastel emojis and forced cheerfulness, as if that alone could soften the blow. It declared that the company's dress expectations had been updated, and that fabric textures now fell under professional standards, whatever that meant. Lena read the memo twice from her corner workspace, its flickering overhead light giving everything a faint interrogation room vibe. She sipped her overly strong coffee, already knowing who the message was aimed at. No one else in the operations wing wore tailored ash gray trousers or crisp structured tops. Most defaulted to bargain outfits that wrinkled by lunchtime. But Lena dressed like she respected herself, and for some reason, that irritated people who relied on shallow authority. The memo's sender, Harper, the HR coordinator with a talent for performative leadership, had been increasingly focused on Lena ever since learning their salaries were closer than she'd assumed. Even her cheerful assistant, Mia, once joked that Lena's wardrobe looked like it belonged in a political drama, a comment that circulated the office like gossip disguised as humor. Lena ignored the whispers and instead immersed herself in the work no one else wanted to understand, organizing clearance schedules, validating documentation, and flagging inconsistencies before they matured into expensive disasters. Her job wasn't glamorous, but it was essential, and she performed it with a level of precision that made her nearly invisible to everyone, but those who depended on her results. Few people in the building even recognized the advanced clearance emblem embedded discreetly into the badge she kept secured in her purse. She had earned it through weeks of interviews, background reviews, and an unannounced home assessment that would have rattled anyone less composed. And she never bragged about it. Power meant nothing if it was paraded around the wrong audience. The badge stayed tucked away, quiet, resting between a packet of almonds and a small notebook, the kind of item that didn't reveal its importance until it needed to speak. Around mid-morning, Harper drifted past her row of cubicles, her heels clicking with rehearsed authority and her perfume sweeping through the air like an announcement. Lena could practically count down the seconds before the inevitable confrontation. Sure enough, Harper made a graceful U-turn straight into Lena's personal space, leaning against the desk with exaggerated sweetness. "Just checking in," she said, stretching out every word. "Did you get a chance to review the new dress guidelines?" Lena didn't look up from her screen. "I did. Nothing in them pertains to me." Within moments, Mia appeared behind Harper, nodding eagerly, as if summoned by silent cue. "We're aiming for a consistent visual identity," Mia chirped. "And some outfits might confuse the branding." Lena finally lifted her gaze. Confusing for whom? Our clients? Or someone trying to justify a policy no one asked for? Harper's grin tightened, though her tone stayed sugary. "We just want to make sure we're aligned, especially when people don't realize they're approaching the line." "I don't approach lines," Lena replied. "I define them." Harper hesitated at that, her expression briefly cracking before she smoothed it into a corporate-approved smile. She stepped back, regrouping, as though she needed reinforcements before engaging again. Mia muttered something meant to be witty, and both left with synchronized confidence, though their lingering glances said more than their words. Lena exhaled slowly, recognizing the scent of manufactured conflict, the kind that didn't happen by accident. She returned to her tasks, but a familiar heaviness settled in her chest, the quiet certainty that someone had decided she was a problem to solve. Not because she failed at her work, but because she excelled at it without seeking validation. It wasn't the first time she sensed sabotage brewing, but this time felt more deliberate, more calculated and more personal. She glanced instinctively toward her purse, the hidden badge inside humming with silent authority, as though reminding her that she wasn't powerless, not even close. Lena opened her notebook to a page titled Boundary Breaches, a quiet log she kept for moments exactly like this. She added a new entry with steady handwriting, capturing the day's escalation in just 2 words: fabric dispute. The absurdity of it didn't matter. Ridiculous behavior could still create real consequences. She closed the notebook and waited. She knew deep down, the day wasn't finished with her yet. The rest of the morning passed with an uneasy stillness, until a new message chimed into Lena's inbox, its subject line stiff and formal. HR review. Immediate attendance required. There was no greeting, no explanation, just a calendar invite stamped with a 15-minute slot and a location. Conference room 2B. Lena stared at the notification for a long moment, the cursor blinking like a countdown. She rose slowly, her movements deliberate, as though bracing for an impact she'd already sensed was coming. The hallway felt colder than usual as she walked, passing coworkers who pretended not to notice her, though she could feel their eyes flicking toward her as she passed. Even her supervisor, who usually offered at least a polite nod, ducked into a stairwell the moment he spotted her approaching. She didn't chase him. She didn't even flinch. It was just another confirmation that something was very wrong. When she reached the glass door of conference room 2B, she paused only long enough to steady her breath before entering. Inside, Harper sat at the center of the table, her tablet positioned like she was about to host a seminar on workplace virtue. To her right sat Mia, clutching a pastel pen as though it were a prop for moral authority. And on the left, Mr. Dalton, the operations manager, shifted awkwardly in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with being dragged into whatever performance this was. Lena took her seat across from them, folding her hands carefully in her lap, her expression calm and unreadable. "Lena," Harper began, voice syrupy. "Thank you for joining us." "It wasn't optional," Lena replied evenly. Mia cleared her throat and unfolded a typed script, her eyes darting across the page like she was reading courtroom lines. "This is a formal separation meeting conducted according to company guidelines," she began, her tone rehearsed. Harper leaned in with exaggerated sympathy. "Based on repeated concerns regarding attire alignment and your responses when approached about it, we've concluded it's best to move in a different direction." Mia slid a 2-page form across the table, its header printed in striking red. "Final determination." Lena skimmed it, noting phrases like cultural disruption and inconsistent visual identity, but nothing referencing her performance. Not one mention of her accuracy, her reliability, her clearance, or the critical responsibilities she managed without recognition. Her chest hollowed with a quiet, icy disbelief, not at the decision, but at the sheer pettiness of the justification. "To confirm," she said softly, "you're ending my employment because of fabric choices?" Harper nodded, relieved the conversation was going predictably. "Among other concerns, yes." "Such as?" Lena asked, her tone still level. Mia shuffled her papers, flustered. "There have been impressions. Comments that seem dismissive. Instances interpreted as undermining leadership." "Interpreted by whom?" Lena asked. Harper flashed a strained smile. "Let's not escalate this. The decision is made." Dalton stared down at the table, clearly wishing to dissolve into the floor rather than witness what was unfolding. From the corner of her eye, Lena spotted a notification blink on her locked computer screen outside the room. A blue system alert she recognized instantly. It was an automated government reminder, a required security check-in tied to her clearance. Harper followed Lena's gaze and shrugged casually. "Well, I guess you won't need that anymore." Lena felt a pulse of cold electricity run through her fingertips, but she simply closed the termination packet with quiet precision. "Please gather your belongings," Mia said in a gentler tone, as though sympathy could soften protocol. "Someone from IT will escort you." Lena stood, her posture steady, even graceful, as though she refused to give the room the satisfaction of a single crack. "Wouldn't want to cause a security concern," she said mildly. Harper chuckled, brushing off the remark without realizing its weight. Lena walked toward the exit, pausing only briefly at the doorway to look back at them. "You've dismissed the only person who understood how to keep your major contract stable," she said quietly. The three faces across the table stiffened, confused, uncomprehending. Lena offered a small, inscrutable smile. "Best of luck." The walk back to her desk felt strangely elongated, as if the hallway itself had stretched to witness her departure. She carried the small cardboard box they provided, a box clearly designed for symbolism rather than practicality, with a lonely sheet of bubble wrap wrinkled at the bottom. No one spoke to her directly, but she could feel the silent ripple of curiosity following her like a draft. People suddenly had a lot of interest in their screens, their keyboards, their empty coffee mugs. Anything but the reality unfolding beside them. She passed the marketing team first. A few glanced up, then immediately looked away, their expressions tightening with awkward sympathy they didn't know how to offer. Someone mouthed "I'm so sorry" from a few desks away, their brows pinched with panic, like they were witnessing the aftermath of something too real. Lena offered a polite nod in return, though her face revealed nothing. She didn't want pity. It wasn't the right currency for what was coming. When she reached her section, her supervisor, Daniel, appeared by her cubicle, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight, looking like a teenager caught somewhere between guilt and avoidance. "Hey, a tough day," he muttered, struggling to find words that wouldn't incriminate him by association. Lena tilted her head, studying him. "Are you actually concerned? Or just trying to stay on script?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Eventually, he offered a weak, "Good luck," before retreating like the conversation had burned him. She didn't watch him leave. His retreat was predictable, an expected final act of managerial self-preservation. Instead, she focused on her belongings, carefully placing her framed photo, her favorite mug, and her files into the box with the discipline of someone refusing to unravel. Her cactus, the one plant she'd managed to keep alive despite last year's suspicious overwatering incident, went in last. But the one item she didn't pack was the badge hidden beneath her keyboard. It gleamed faintly, its dark embedded chip catching the overhead light as she lifted it. The badge wasn't just identification. It was a promise, a responsibility, and a connection to a system much larger than this office. She placed it back into its protective sleeve, an insulated pouch clearly marked with secure handling instructions. Harper hadn't even asked about the badge protocol. She had no idea what she had trampled over. With the box under one arm and her purse over her shoulder, Lena took one last look at her workspace, not sentimentally but analytically. Open files blinked on her screen, half completed, still awaiting someone with the clearance to understand them. Charts, reports, and system logs, all carefully maintained by her, were now fragments of a contract held together by threads no one else recognized. They would unravel. She didn't need to lift a finger. She walked to the elevator without slowing, passing the front desk where an employee she didn't know handed her a sealed envelope containing final pay details. "Here you go," he mumbled, unable to meet her eyes. "Perfect," Lena said, dropping the packet into the box without even opening it. When the elevator doors shut, she finally allowed herself one deep, grounding breath. She wasn't sad. She wasn't even angry anymore. The betrayal had been absorbed and transformed into something far colder and far clearer. It was resolve, sharp, metallic, and humming beneath her ribs like a newly powered engine. This wasn't an ending. It was an ignition. And although no one in that building realized it yet, their next problem had already begun. As she stepped outside, a sudden gust of wind swept through the lobby doors behind her, bringing with it a shift in the building's atmosphere, tight, urgent, electrified. She turned just enough to see two individuals in dark suits enter the reception area with purposeful steps. Their presence was quiet but commanding, the type that made people straighten instinctively without knowing why. Lena didn't move, but her pulse tightened with recognition. The badges clipped to their lapels weren't company-issued. They bore an emblem she knew intimately, an emblem that only appeared when something important had malfunctioned at a structural level. The pair didn't ask for directions. They didn't hesitate. They walked straight toward the security office with measured, unmistakable certainty. They moved with a quiet authority that instantly changed the temperature of the room, drawing subtle alarm from employees who had no idea what their presence signified. The woman led the way, her posture upright and exact, her expression neutral but alert. The man followed half a step behind, his small black briefcase held like a tool rather than an accessory. Their matching lapel pins, discreet black with a silver-ringed insignia, told Lena everything she needed to know. These were not auditors. They weren't visiting consultants. They were from an oversight division tied directly to her clearance protocols. Her heart gave one single tight thump in her chest, not fear recognition. They were here because something had already gone wrong inside the building. The agents reached the receptionist, who looked suddenly overwhelmed by their presence. "We need to speak with your head of security and your chief executive," the woman said calmly, her voice firm enough to bypass small talk entirely. "Immediately," she added, making it clear they weren't open to scheduling options. The receptionist blinked hard, then scrambled to make the call with trembling hands. Lena remained seated near the exit, her box resting on her knees, though she had long forgotten its weight. Her senses sharpened, capturing every detail. The agents clipped phrases, the receptionist stuttered responses, the shift in air pressure as panic seeped into the building. She kept her gaze lowered, allowing herself to appear disinterested. But inside, her mind was crystallizing the situation with chilling clarity. Someone in the office had accessed the wrong file, or failed to follow the clearance exit procedure, and triggered an automated alert. She had warned them countless times that compliance wasn't a suggestion, and now the federal oversight team had arrived to investigate the breach her termination had caused. The irony was almost poetic. The receptionist finally stammered, They're both on their way down." The female agent nodded once, accepting the information without acknowledgement of the chaos it would spark. The male agent scanned the lobby slowly, his practiced gaze passing over Lena for only a moment. He didn't recognize her, not yet. Lena inhaled the faint scent of polished floors and nervous energy, letting the moment settle. For the first time since stepping out of that conference room, her humiliation softened into something far more grounded. She had not been irrational. She had not been dramatic. She had been right. The elevator chimed, a sharp metallic sound that sliced through the tension. Everyone's heads turned instinctively, even those pretending not to watch. Lena didn't need to see who stepped out. She could already identify the frantic rhythm of the approaching footsteps. It was Harper, and she was moving with the clipped, uneven stride of someone realizing a mistake had metastasized into crisis. Harper's expression was washed of its usual confidence, gone were the polished smiles and breezy superiority. Her face was pale, tightened with the unmistakable realization that something had spiraled far beyond her influence. She didn't even look toward Lena directly. She flicked her gaze over her briefly, then recoiled as though the sight stung. Mia trailed behind Harper, looking equally rattled, though without the same awareness of the gravity. The agent's presence snapped the last of Harper's composure. She hesitated only a second before the female agent addressed her sharply. "Ms. Hollis. This way." Harper nodded, her throat bobbing as she swallowed hard and stepped into the conference room the agents designated. Mia wasn't invited. She lingered in the hallway looking lost, clutching her pastel pen like a displaced prop. As the door closed behind Harper, the receptionist exhaled shakily, and a hush fell across the entire lobby. Every keyboard stopped clicking. Every conversation paused mid-sentence. Dozens of eyes attempted to sneak glances without turning their heads. Corporate stillness filled the space, the kind that only arrives when something irreversible is happening behind closed doors. From her seat near the lobby exit, Lena watched the conference room's frosted glass as faint shadows flickered behind it, gestures, movements, tension sharpening the air. She couldn't hear much at first, only muffled tones and clipped phrases that rose and fell like the muted soundtrack of a documentary no one wanted to star in. But then the voices sharpened, fragments slipping through the thin gap beneath the door. Words like authorization lapse and protocol breach floated outward like pieces of broken glass. Another voice, deeper, firmer, cut in next, clearly belonging to the male agent. "You dismissed a cleared contractor without notifying oversight?" he demanded, each syllable deliberate enough to halt breath. Harper's voice answered, thin and wavering. "We were addressing a behavioral issue." The agent interrupted, his tone steely. "You severed access before a compliance reset. That is not a behavioral issue, it's a procedural failure." Lena lifted her coffee cup and took a slow sip, the warmth grounding her while chaos unfurled behind that door. She could see coworkers peeking subtly from cubicles, their eyes darting between the conference room and her as though connecting dots too late. Only now did they understand that the quiet, composed woman they'd watched pack a box wasn't just another employee. She had anchored a contract worth more than the whole building combined. Minutes later, the elevator chimed again, this time more urgently. The CEO, Mr. Renwick, emerged with hair out of place and tie askew, moving with the frantic energy of someone who sensed a catastrophe they couldn't yet quantify. He rushed past reception, scanning the room until his gaze locked onto Lena. His expression shifted from confusion to dread in an instant. "Lena," he began, breathless, approaching her with forced cordiality. But she didn't move. She didn't even uncross her legs. "I'm no longer part of your staff," she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough volume for a few nearby employees to hear. "If you need an appointment, you can contact my personal email." Mr. Renwick's jaw tightened, panic softening the edges of his words. "Please, can we talk privately?" Lena met his gaze with an unwavering steadiness. "Your team seems quite occupied with protocol violations. You may want to speak with them first." His breath hitched, the implication hitting him square in the chest. Before he could respond, the conference room door opened sharply. The female agent, collected, composed, stepped out, scanning the lobby as though evaluating the room's structural integrity. Her eyes landed on Lena with a hint of recognition, as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. She walked directly toward her, heels clicking with controlled momentum. "Ms. Arden?" the agent asked, voice crisp but respectful. Lena rose slowly, her box still at her side, her posture steady and unbothered. "Still me," she replied. "At least until someone else revokes a clearance without reading the manual." A ghost of a smile flickered across the agent's face. Rare, brief, but genuine. "We'd appreciate a few moments of your time," the agent said. "You are not under review. We simply need information." The male agent joined her, nodding respectfully to Lena before glancing toward the CEO, whose face had drained of color. "Your dismissal triggered a compliance alert," he said. "We're assessing the impact." Murmurs rippled through the lobby like a slow-building wave. The CEO swallowed visibly. "We can resolve this internally," he said weakly. The female agent corrected him without raising her voice. "No, Mr. Renwick. Internal oversight is no longer an option." Lena turned her gaze toward the glass exit for a moment, letting the truth settle around her like calm weather after a storm. This was no longer her burden to carry. But she had all the leverage. The agents positioned themselves beside Lena, not behind her, not in front of her, but beside her, an unmistakable signal that she was neither a suspect nor an outsider. Employees around the lobby stiffened as they watched the formation, their expressions shifting from confusion to a dawning, uneasy realization. For the first time all morning, Lena felt the weight of humiliation lift off her shoulders like a coat she never wanted to wear. She wasn't here to defend herself. She was here because the truth had finally caught up to the people who tried to undermine her. The female agent turned slightly toward her. "There are gaps in the company's compliance reports, and we believe you can clarify the timeline." Lena nodded once. "I maintained all documentation accurately. Any missing pieces happened after my access was revoked." The male agent exhaled through his nose, a quiet, controlled sign of confirmation. "That aligns with what we're seeing," he said, almost to himself. Behind them, the CEO hovered nervously near a potted plant, trying and failing to maintain authority as the situation unraveled. Harper emerged from the conference room seconds later, her shoulders rigid, the color drained from her face like someone had erased her confidence with a cloth. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out, only a thin, startled breath. Her eyes flicked between Lena and the agents as if searching for an escape route that no longer existed. "Ms. Arden," the CEO stammered again, stepping closer. We'd like to formally reinstate your position." Lena blinked slowly, absorbing the desperation disguised as diplomacy. "Your timing is interesting," she said evenly. Her tone wasn't hostile, it was simply honest, which somehow hit harder. Desperation pushed the CEO further. Along with a salary adjustment, 15%, and a senior title. Immediately, the entire lobby froze. This was no longer a workplace conversation. It was a public unraveling of authority. Even the receptionist paused mid-keystroke, her eyes wide behind her glasses. Lena offered a faint, polite smile, The kind people mistake as kindness before realizing it contains steel. That's a generous attempt, she said softly. She set her cardboard box down at her feet, freeing both hands as she folded them calmly in front of her. But the environment you crafted, she continued, is not something a raise could repair. Harper looked stricken, her lips parting as though to negotiate, but the agent's presence silenced her. The male agent spoke next, his tone carrying the finality of a closing file drawer. Ms. Arden is assisting us voluntarily. She is under no obligation to return to this organization. His gaze flicked toward the CEO, whose shoulders sagged under the implied verdict. Your offer, the agent added, will not alter the compliance assessment. The CEO's composure cracked, a tremor running through his jaw despite his attempts to steady himself. Harper clasped her hands together tightly as if bracing for impact from forces she didn't understand. It was the first time Lena had ever seen her without manufactured confidence. And the emptiness behind Harper's eyes confirmed what Lena already knew. She had never expected accountability to arrive wearing a badge. The female agent gestured toward the hallway. Ms. Arden, if you're ready, we'd like to continue this discussion in a more private setting. Lena lifted her box with one hand and her purse with the other, nodding once. Of course, she said. Let's finish what they mishandled. The agents exchanged a subtle, approving glance. As Lena walked with them toward the side corridor, the employees parted silently, creating a path as though acknowledging a procession none of them could fully comprehend. She did not gloat. She did not smirk. She simply moved forward with the calm assurance of someone who had nothing left to lose, and everything left to clarify. Behind her, the company's leadership stood frozen, surrounded by the ruins of their own decisions. The corridor the agents led her through was quieter than the lobby, lined with framed motivational posters that suddenly felt ironic in their forced optimism. Lena walked between the two agents, her footsteps steady, her posture upright, not in defiance, but in full ownership of her place in this unfolding disaster. They stopped near a small consultation room off the main hallway, its glass walls opaque enough to offer privacy without secrecy. The female agent held the door for Lena, a gesture filled with understated respect rather than formality. Inside, the room felt cleaner, calmer, detached from the chaos vibrating through the rest of the building. A polished oak table sat beneath a soft overhead light, and a single notepad waited at the center as though anticipating a briefing. Lena set her box down on the floor and rested her purse on a chair, feeling the slight weight of her clearance badge inside like a pulse. The agents remained standing at first, exchanging a brief, wordless communication before turning their attention fully to her. Ms. Arden, the male agent began, his tone measured. You maintain several access points essential to the organization's contracted responsibilities. Lena nodded. I handled the classifications, documentation integrity, and audit readiness, most of which no one else here was trained to manage. The female agent folded her arms lightly. We're aware. That's why your departure triggered review flags almost instantly. And, she added with emphasis, why we need clarity from the one person who handled the work correctly. Lena felt a faint warmth beneath her sternum, recognition, long overdue. I can walk you through everything, she said. I kept detailed notes after realizing internal processes were inconsistent. The male agent cracked a subtle, approving smile. We suspected as much. He set his briefcase on the table and opened it with a crisp click, withdrawing a thin folder marked with a secure seal. This, he continued, is a summary of what we've found so far. The short version. The company did not follow mandated separation procedures for a cleared asset. Meaning, Lena said, finishing the thought, they severed access without completing the required resets. Exactly, the female agent confirmed. We've already halted their access pending further investigation. The air around them thickened, not with threat, but with the gravity of irreversible consequences. We'd like your help transitioning the contract oversight to a temporary external team, the male agent said, his tone steady. You understand the workflow better than anyone here. Lena raised an eyebrow. Does that mean you're asking me to consult? Not exactly, the female agent replied. We're asking you to advise, and potentially to step into a more formal oversight role. A quiet pause settled between them as Lena considered the offer, her mind moving with calm precision. Hours ago, she was being escorted out over a trivial complaint about fabric texture. Now she was being courted for a position rooted in legitimacy, responsibility, and respect. The contrast landed with an almost poetic clarity. "I'll help," Lena said finally, "but I won't return to the environment that mishandled everything." Both agents nodded, unsurprised. "We wouldn't expect you to," the male agent said. "We're coordinating a full audit. Their eligibility for major contracts is already under formal review." A soft knock interrupted the moment. The door opened a few inches, revealing the receptionist looking timid and uncertain. "Sorry to interrupt," she said quietly, "but the executive team, they're requesting an update." The female agent responded without turning around. "They'll be briefed when we're done." The receptionist nodded quickly and vanished, closing the door with reverent caution. Lena exhaled, a slow release of tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the morning. A strange calm settled over her, the kind that arrives when someone regains control of a narrative others tried to rewrite. She straightened slightly in her chair, ready to begin the debriefing that would reshape the entire situation. This was no longer about losing a job. It was about stepping into her rightful authority. The male agent unfolded a digital tablet and slid it toward Lena, the screen displaying a timeline layered with system logs and audit notifications. "Walk us through these entries," he said. "Start wherever feels relevant." Lena adjusted the tablet slightly, scanning the entries with the ease of someone reviewing her own handwriting. Her voice remained even as she began to explain each sequence, each timestamp, each protocol the company had failed to follow. "They never completed the clearance resync after my quarterly review," she said, pointing to a highlighted section. "And this," she continued, scrolling to a flagged alert, "is where someone attempted to access the restricted drive without the proper handoff." The female agent exchanged a sharp glance with her counterpart. "Unauthorized access attempts aligned with the termination window," he confirmed quietly. Lena continued outlining her documentation trail, illustrating how she had aligned every file with audit readiness standards. "I kept backups of critical paths in my notebook," she said. "Not the files, just the workflows. Enough to reconstruct what they broke." The female agent nodded, impressed. "That level of foresight isn't common." Lena lifted one shoulder slightly. "When you work with people who undervalue process, preparation becomes a survival skill." The male agent tapped a few notes into the tablet. "This aligns with our preliminary findings. They didn't just mishandle your exit, they exposed the entire project." A quiet pulse of vindication moved through Lena, but she didn't show it. She simply replied, "I suspected as much." The female agent leaned forward. "The Oversight Council will need your cooperation during the transition phase." "The project remains active," the male agent added. "We don't intend to let it collapse." Lena folded her hands on the table, her expression softening into something more contemplative. "What exactly would you require from me?" she asked. "Guidance," the female agent said. "And stability. Think of it as stepping into the role your former employer failed to protect," the male agent clarified. Lena inhaled slowly, letting the affirmation settle. Hours ago, she'd been dismissed without dignity. Now she was being asked to anchor a project that stretched far beyond office politics. It wasn't revenge, it was realignment. And it felt right. A soft vibration buzzed on the male agent's phone. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening with professional concern. "Give me one moment," he said, stepping out of the room with swift, controlled steps. Lena and the female agent exchanged a brief look, unspoken understanding flowing effortlessly between two people who both respected protocol. Moments later, the door opened again, but not with the agent's composed presence. It was the CEO, flanked by Harper, both wearing expressions of nervous anticipation, as if bracing for a final verdict. The female agent straightened instantly, her demeanor shifting into something clipped and formidable. "This room is occupied," she said firmly. "Please wait outside." But the CEO raised his hands in a pleading gesture. Please, just 30 seconds. We need to speak with Ms. Arden. Lena didn't rise. She didn't even turn her chair fully in their direction. Whatever you need to say, she replied calmly. You may say from there. Harper clasped her hands, her voice quivering. We made a mistake. A significant one. The CEO swallowed hard. And we'd like the opportunity to correct it. Lena blinked slowly, her patience controlled and pristine. You had that opportunity before creating unnecessary damage, she said. But I'm listening. Harper's expression cracked with desperation. Would you consider returning? Under new conditions. The CEO rushed to add. We'll restructure leadership. We'll revise responsibilities. We'll? The female agent cut him off. This conversation is not appropriate at this time. Her voice remained steady, but carried the unmistakable tone of final authority. Your organization is under review, she continued. Recruitment discussions are irrelevant until the audit concludes. The CEO deflated, his shoulders sagging under the weight of consequences finally catching up. Lena offered no rescue, no soft landing. I wish you clarity moving forward, she said. Truly. But my path is no longer tied to this environment. Harper's eyes shimmered with a muted panic, but she said nothing more. The agents waited until both executives stepped backward into the hallway before closing the door with finality. The door clicked softly behind the retreating executives, leaving the room wrapped in a calmer, more focused quiet. The female agent exhaled once, a subtle release of the tension that had briefly entered with the CEO's intrusion. She turned back to Lena with an expression that blended professionalism with something far rarer. Genuine respect. You handled that with remarkable composure, she said. Lena offered a faint smile. I've had practice. Not everyone confronted by their entire leadership behaves with that level of restraint, the female agent observed. Lena folded her hands loosely. Some lessons are worth learning early. Her tone was soft, but the truth beneath it was sharp enough to slice through any remaining uncertainty. Moments later, the male agent returned, closing the door behind him with a quiet finality. His expression had settled back into its usual calm, but there was a hint of urgency in his eyes. We've received confirmation, he said, glancing between them. The Compliance Council has initiated a full suspension of the company's contract access. The female agent nodded once, as if she'd already anticipated the outcome. Lena absorbed the information with a steady breath. How long will the suspension last? Pending audit, the male agent replied. But initial indicators suggest an extended period. They didn't safeguard protocol, the female agent added. And oversight takes precedence over preference. It was delivered without malice, simply fact. The male agent placed a formal document on the table, sliding it toward Lena. This outlines your advisory role during the transition period, he said. It's temporary, but impactful. Lena glanced over the document, noting how carefully each clause was crafted. Transparent, precise, respectful. She had never seen paperwork from her former employer this clean. Your insights will help ensure continuity, the female agent explained, and prevent further disruption. Lena set the document back down. What's the time commitment? Flexible, the male agent replied. We're willing to adapt to your availability. We prioritize competence, the female agent added. Not bureaucracy. Lena considered this, really considered it. After years spent working in an office where initiative often went unnoticed and policy took precedence over people, the offer felt refreshingly aligned with her values. She could contribute meaningfully, without navigating egos or political posturing. It was the first proposition in a long time that made sense. I'm willing to support the transition, Lena said finally. The agents exchanged a brief, approving glance. We're glad to have you on board, the female agent replied. Your professionalism made this process significantly easier. The male agent closed his folder and locked it into his briefcase with a clean metallic click. We'll coordinate next steps over the next few days, he said. You'll receive secure correspondence. Nothing routed through your former employer. Lena nodded. Probably for the best. A shared understanding passed between them. Quiet, mutual, grounded in respect for boundaries her previous workplace never honored. When the agents opened the door, the hallway outside had grown still again. Employees who had once pretended not to notice her now watched in open awe, their gazes filled with questions they were too afraid to ask. The CEO stood near the wall, shoulders slumped, his face pale with the realization that the outcome was irreversible. Harper lingered nearby, her expression hollow, as though the floor might give out beneath her at any second. Lena stepped past them, not hurriedly, not theatrically, simply with the steady dignity she had always carried. She didn't speak to them, and they didn't dare stop her. The agents walked alongside her, their presence a silent escort through the ruins of misguided authority. And for the first time all day, the building felt smaller than her ambition. The lobby doors slid open automatically as Lena approached, releasing a wave of fresh air that felt like stepping out of someone else's narrative and back into her own. Sunlight spilled across the concrete walkway outside, warming her face and cutting through the chilly tension she'd carried since morning. She paused only long enough to let the moment settle across her shoulders like a new beginning. For the first time since the dress code email landed in her inbox, she felt truly weightless. The female agent joined her on the landing, her footsteps crisp but unhurried. "You navigated today with exceptional clarity," she said, her tone more personal than before. Lena let out a dry, honest breath. "I navigated it quietly. There's a difference." A rare smile touched the agent's lips, small but sincere. The agent reached into her coat and withdrew a simple cream-colored business card embossed with a subtle emblem. There was no title, no office address, just a direct contact number, and her name pressed into the cardstock like a private doorway. "We subcontract oversight specialists when a contractor becomes unstable," she said. "And this one is unstable." She held the card out. "If you're open to a role beyond temporary advising, call this number next week." Lena turned the card over in her hand, feeling the raised edges of the watermark, a symbol of credibility her former workplace never offered. "I'm assuming the compensation is more rational?" she asked. "Rational," the agent echoed, amused. "And more importantly, honest." There was a steady warmth in the way she said it, as if she'd already decided Lena belonged there. The male agent stepped out onto the landing a moment later, his demeanor calm and assured. "We appreciate your cooperation today," he said. "You helped prevent a larger issue." Lena nodded once. "I didn't do it for them." "We know," he replied. "That's why it mattered." The agents walked toward a dark sedan parked along the curb, their figures composed and unhurried, leaving Lena standing in the golden wash of afternoon. She watched them go, not out of dependence, but out of gratitude for a type of professionalism she'd rarely witnessed. When they turned the corner and disappeared, the quiet outside felt different, lighter, sharper, full of possibility. The world hadn't changed, but her place in it had. Lena slipped the business card into the same pocket where her clearance badge rested, the two items fitting together like pieces of a future she hadn't planned for but now recognized. She walked toward her car without once looking back at the glass building behind her. There was nothing inside worth reclaiming. No dignity left to salvage, no bridge left unburned by those who had underestimated her. What remained was a sense of liberation so clear it felt almost electric. The door shut with a quiet, definitive click as she settled into the driver's seat, her hands steady on the wheel. The small cardboard box on the passenger seat looked less like an emblem of loss and more like luggage for a departure she'd waited years to make. She inhaled deeply, the kind of breath taken by someone who has finally escaped a storm. As she started the engine, a single thought crystallized with brilliant clarity. She hadn't been dismissed, she'd been redirected. "Let them rebuild whatever they thought they demolished," she murmured to herself, gaze steady on the road ahead. She shifted into drive, the sun catching the edge of her badge through the pocket of her bag. "I'm going somewhere better," she said softly, as though stating a fact rather than a hope. And then she pulled out of the lot without hesitation, without regret, without a single unanswered question left behind her. If you're loving this story so far, make sure to hit that like button so YouTube knows to show you more. And don't forget to subscribe. We drop new twists, betrayals, and justice-served stories every single week.